of the things I'm most proud of being Latino is there is a just strong work ethic kind of beat into us from the moment we're born.
Hello and welcome to a new episode of the Peter O. Estévez Show. This is your host, Peter O. Estévez. And today we have a good friend of mine who we actually met in Clubhouse about 2 years ago, back in 2020, in the midst of COVID, in the midst of Corona, when we're all scrambling how to stay busy, how to pivot, how to change, how to evolve. And as I started my movement, at the time, it was not excellent. Then we had not named the movement yet. But Juan Longoria was key, instrumental, and very active participant of getting the word out there about the movement. And we developed a friendship. We don't talk very often, but I had seen his professional career evolve and change, and I see what he does. And he's definitely one of those Latinos that we want to highlight as part of the Excelente movement, and as part of a professional that he is. You know, Juan Longoria is the director of T-Mobile, supporting the customer experience centers around the globe. Yes, I did say around the globe. And the co-chair of our Magenta Latinx Network as part of a multicultural network ERG. Also a philanthropist, he's the executive director and founder of REV. I'm just going to call it REVJLO, okay? REVJLO, Charities in the Rio Grande Valley, Texas. Their mission is to remove obstacles and opportunities. As a result of his leadership, REVJLO has provided over $100,000 into scholarships and has assisted over 500 families in South Texas. For his effort, Juan was recently featured as a contributing author on the Spotlight in the Hispanic Stars Rising Volume 2 by Claudia Romo Elderman. Hello, Juan Longoria, and welcome to the Peter O. Estévez Show.
And thanks, Peter. What an introduction. I appreciate it. Hope everything's going well for you.
Well deserved. Well deserved, my friend. So tell us a little bit about who is Juan Longoria? What is that? You know, I went over the highlights, but, you know, I am very interested in our transformation as Latinos, you know, whether we're first generation or second generation, wherever we are. Tell me a little bit about your childhood. Who are you? Where did you come from? Tell me about your parents.
Yeah, so I'm a second generation, proud Mexican American. I was born and raised in deep South Texas in the Rio Grande Valley, which is still home 42 years later after a couple of trips around the world and in different states. But first off, you know, I am the son of Juan and Isabel Longoria, and they are such an instrumental piece of how I was raised. They took us to Michigan at an early age with my grandparents to go work in the field. So we were migrant workers. And I remember having to kind of wrap up the school year sooner and start later and catch up, but all to go learn what hard work really was. My dad kind of was, he was self-employed. He was a contractor for AT&T at the time, running a lot of cables, fiber, that kind of stuff before it was a big deal like it is now. So we did okay. We weren't, you know, well off by any means, but we had enough to have clothes and food, but he wanted us to go and learn. So that migrant worker experience I brought with me and throughout my entire kind of, you know, teenage years, my adulthood now. But at the root, man, I'm somebody who's always been inspired to do more at an early age for himself. And after a certain point, now I'm inspired to do more for those that look and sound like me and come from similar experiences.
What does that mean for those that look and sound like me? That's very interesting, because it's something that you and I talk about. But let's dig deeper into that for the community.
Yeah, well, one of the things, you know, we can talk more about this later, but that I've kind of learned through my experience in DE&I, especially in my role as a co-chair at T-Mobile, is diversity isn't just about our different last names or the languages that we speak or what our skin color looks like or our sexual orientation. For me, it's kind of evolved into a diversity of thought. So when I say people who look like me and sound like me, I don't mean just other Latinos. I'm talking about people who are marginalized, people who aren't represented equally at their corporations, people who do well in school, maybe not good enough to get that scholarship, but enough to where they're going to go and get their degrees and be successful, or people who are wise enough to know what they want to do. And that may not involve school, but they have a passion and a direction and they want to follow it and they need a little help. I feel like I was able to do a lot in my later years of my 42-year-old life because I made the decisions that allowed me to do that later. But looking back, I wish I'd had somebody to kind of give me a little extra mentorship or coaching or assistants right out of high school that I think would have allowed me to do more sooner than I have.
Well, I absolutely, and I often talk about that. I often talk about the fact that let's talk about the Latino community for just the purpose of our conversation. I think in the Latino community we don't have enough representation, and this is one of the key movements that I am trying to do, not only through Excelente, but through every platform that I have available where I can get my message out. As a young boy, much like you. I wish I would have had those mentors. I didn't even know what the word mentor was until just the last couple of years. Back then as a young boy, first generation immigrant to the U.S., one of 13 children. I knew that I didn't want to be where I was at. But I didn't have anybody that I could simulate. I didn't have anybody in my community that I wanted to aspire to be like. Okay. The reality is that it is not up to recently that we have begun to see where Latinos have been highlighted, where we have become mainstream, whether it's in as actors, as business leaders, as politicians, whatever. We're beginning to see that. But very early on, me growing up as a young boy, I still experienced a lot of discrimination. And not only, that was not isolated to discrimination from other races. It was also this discrimination that I experienced from my own race, from my own people. Just because I didn't have the resources, I didn't have the means, I didn't have the education. My family was different. One of 13, you can imagine, a family in a 2-bedroom, 1-bath home in a corner house where we're really, really highlighted. People were able to see, we were really, really exposed to that. So tell us, how does somebody like Juan Longoria becomes the co-chair of T-Mobile worldwide? Because that's a very, very, very ambitious position. It's also a position that gives you access to a lot of things, Juan. So tell us a little bit about that, about your professional career. How were you able to achieve that?
Yeah. That's a long story. Well, I think, ultimately you start off, and I think part of one of the things I'm most proud of being Latino is there is a just strong work ethic kind of beat into us from the moment we're born, from our parents. We see our parents working hard, our grandparents working hard, and you take that with you, and there's pride in that. I've always felt like I had something to prove, maybe even a little bit so to this day, that says that I can do it as good or better than anybody else. One of the things my grandfather always taught me as a kid is if you're going to do something, you go out there and you do it better than anybody, and then you make it easier for other people to do the same. So I've always carried that with me. And, I right out of high school, I took some college courses. I was bartending. I was having fun, making cash, going out, spending it, because there's always cash tomorrow in the bartender business. And I realized I didn't want to be a bartender for the rest of my life. I didn't want to be, at this point now, 42 years old, looking back and not having any other experiences. Plenty of successful bartenders make a lot more than I do right now. So it's not about the job. It's just I wanted different experiences. And I remember applying for a job as a call center employee, taking, this will age me a little bit, dial-up internet tech support calls for, I believe it was MSN at the time, through a business process outsourcer. But I always did well. I always figured out what's the job and how do I get really good? How do I practice the things I need to practice to be better than anybody else at this job? And I've carried that with me. So I got promoted through that company, started working with Dish Network, went through a variety of different positions there, learned kind of the back end parts of the business, worked for a small company named Pocket Wireless. It doesn't exist anymore, but again, kept honing my craft and learning more and more about different areas of the business. And when I finally got to T-Mobile, working for a company that really, really invested a lot of time and resources into their employees, gave us the benefits of tuition reimbursement, those kind of things. I really was allowed to kind of explore a whole new skill set that I kind of always knew was there, but I hadn't had a chance to develop in. I did that on my own. So I kind of got promoted through the levels. When I became a senior manager several years ago, I think that's where kind of this role of director and doing more in the company became a reality. I noticed that it wasn't just my performance that was well, it was the ability to network, right? I kind of got along with everybody, but I was able to work well with everybody. And in doing so, I got to see different parts of the business where I could contribute and give back. And in that regard, I think I gained a lot of respect from people. But to our point earlier, it took, I'll call him out, it took a man by the name of Daniel Dorschel, who was also Latino, to kind of wake me up and say, hey, what's next? Like, what do you want to do? And I said, I don't really know. I've been kind of working hard, and after I work hard for a few months or a few years, I get noticed and somebody presents me with an opportunity and I take it. And he kind of said, you're at a point where you need to go make those opportunities and you're deserving of them. Don't wait for somebody to come kind of present it to you. Go get it. And have you made it known, right? So that's where I really started working on my career to move into this director position. And it wasn't easy, but after about 2 years of kind of putting my foot down, saying I am going to be the next director for the global care department. I had to move to the Philippines. I came back to the U.S. And 2 years later, here I am. And that's where, not that it's required, but definitely the weight of a title behind your name gives you somewhat of a louder voice in certain circles. And I wanted to use my new title and my experiences and the things that I learned in the last several years to go help people who are just starting their careers out with T-Mobile. So that's why I applied for the co-chair role for the Magenta Latinx Network, which is part of our larger Multicultural Alliance ERGs. And we're getting to do a lot of good. We've created a lot of programs. Of course, it's a lot easier when the company, walks the talk. There's a lot of businesses out there that say they want to do these things, but there's no money, there's no budget, there's no effort, there's no reinforcement from your senior leadership team. Luckily, we have all that in place. It makes it a lot easier to really partner with our HR teams, our DE&I teams, and kind of further the advocacy and the pursuit of better representation along with other programs for our team members.
I love that. So a couple of things I want to touch on that you highlighted, and I see that you're doing. So you're really walking the walk and talking the talk. You said when you were young, you didn't have to. In retrospect, you wish you would have had those mentors. You wish you would have had those resources available. That somebody would tap you on the shoulder and working you up. And now you're doing that through the Magenta Latinx Network. You have become that mentor. You are the one out there that is looking, for lack of a better word, scouting new talent and new opportunities that will, that you would be able to help and advance in their careers. Now, something else that you say, Juan, and I want to touch on, is that work hard. Okay, you were working hard, but yet you were only waiting for the right moment. You were waiting for somebody. We're doing the traditional thing that we always have done as probably just as hardworking people, whether you're Latino or whatever you are, right? I remember when I got my first job right out of high school, I got a job at USAA, okay? And USAA is the largest automobile insurance company in the world, life insurance company in the world, okay? Based out of San Antonio, Texas. And it was, when I told my mom that I got hired, and I had an entry-level position, okay? I remember my mom's kind and loving words were, "Mijito, take care of your job, okay? Don't rock the boat, okay? Don't do anything to jeopardize his job. If you hang in there, you may be able to retire and have something stable into your later years in life." And I think a lot of us do that or have done that because we have been socially conditioned to believe that, okay? You were blessed enough to be able to have Daniel Dershell, is that what you called him?
Correct. Yeah.
That Daniel was kind enough to say, "Hey, what's going on, man? You're a talented guy. You're a hard worker. But what are you doing to advance yourself?" Tell me, in your experience now, from your position at Magenta Latinx Network, do you see a lot of people out there that are just coasting along, waiting for something to happen? And how do you identify them? And what do you do? What do you do to encourage them to do something different?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's something that we all have as Latinos, in any industry, in any company. And I think that's one of the things that we're working very hard to kind of change. The first thing is just calling it out. I think we can share it, right? The moment you said that your mom told you to take care of your job, immediately I can tell you that I had the same conversation with my mom when I first started bartending. Cuida tu trabajo, cuida tu trabajo. Whatever the job is, take care of it because it's going to take care of you down the road. And it's just that people don't know because we can only do what we've seen up until that point. Mentorship is something that's very similar along those lines that I try to break through to people and say, you should have a mentor and you have every right to ask for a mentor. They may say no, but you're not even asking. I've got people on LinkedIn reaching out to me from other companies, people I've never met, saying, "Hey, I heard about your name, or I see you're a leader at T-Mobile. I'd like for you to mentor me." And these are people that I have no connection to. Yet there's people probably within my own company, that look like me and sound like me, that for whatever reason don't feel that they've done enough to earn the right to even ask me to help them or ask me to mentor them. So that's one of the things that we try to get out in front of everybody and say, "Hey, you deserve a mentor. You should be asking for these types of relationships." I try to educate people on what I believe is a difference between a mentor and a stakeholder. If you're going, and based on my personal opinion, if you're applying for a promotion or a different job, the stakeholders that are going to be making that decision, the hiring managers, all the people involved with that interview process, I don't think they should be your mentors, because in a way you're kind of going to them saying, here's all the things I don't know, and I need you to teach me these things. And you create a perception for some leaders, not all, but some leaders may say, hey, well, you're kind of a little green, come back when you're ready. But that's when you go to a mentor to help guide you through those conversations and find the things that are already inside of you, so you can articulate that back to the stakeholders. You can add value to those stakeholders before the interview even happens. So when the interview does happen, you're already top of mind as a candidate, versus showing up with them having no knowledge of you, hoping you win it in a 30-minute interview that, could go any which way. So that's the first thing we do, is try to be transparent and really call it out and show people how others are doing it and why we should too.
I love it. So you're basically saying, emphasize your strengths, okay? Not necessarily that you're puffing or bluffing, but I think a lot of times we have a tendency, as people, we have a tendency to focus on what we're not capable of doing, what we have not done, what we have not accomplished, instead of saying, this is my strengths, this is where I'm good at, this is what because unfortunately, Juan, and I want you to tell me your opinion. Unfortunately, we have been standardized, right? We have been, we've been in an institutionalized educational system that puts us all at the same level. You're in grade 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 12, okay? And you either have a B, a C, a D, or an F, right? So we already believe that we are only going to focus on the things that we don't know how to do, instead of re-emphasizing or emphasizing the things that we're very good at. Now, let's talk a little bit about your philanthropist work as an executive director of, I call it REVJLO, but you may correct me, okay? Is that what it's called?
That's it, man. That's it. When we named it, my wife and I and one of my cousins had this idea to start a nonprofit, because we were volunteering a lot, and we found that people want you, at least with those organizations, they want you to volunteer, but in the way that they want you to volunteer. And if you had any ideas about maybe you can do a little bit more this way, they're like, let's not do that. This is what we're doing. So we kind of got frustrated that we didn't feel people were doing the right things or enough of the right things. So we said, let's start our own. A few weeks before we named it, I had gotten ordained online because I was going to do my brother's wedding, and I was going to be the officiant. So I became Reverend Juan Longoria online, and my cousin thought it would be great, kind of an insight thing between the three of us, to name it REVJLO for Reverend Juan Longoria. Okay. One, because the name is so odd, people would ask, like, what is the name? And it would give us an opening to talk about it and market it a little differently. But yeah, you said it right. You're one of the first people to get it right.
Well, it kind of makes sense. It looked like you put together two names, and I kind of like it. So tell us a little bit about the work of REVJLO. You have allocated over $100,000 in scholarships and have assisted over 500 families. Another myth in the Latin community is, and I remember Mother saying these thousands of times. I remember watching television and seeing the ads of the African kids that were hungry, and they ask you to donate $1, $1 a month and stuff like that. And as a young boy, I would tell Mother, Mother, can we do that? And I remember Mom, and today I understand, right? But my mom would always tell me, la caridad empieza en casa. Charity begins at home, okay? I believe in a completely different mindset. I believe that we live in a fully abundant world, in a fully abundant universe, that there's plenty of money, there's plenty of opportunities, there's plenty of clothes, there's plenty of jobs, there's plenty of everything, okay? I think some of us have been socially conditioned to believe that we have to live in a limited mindset, and that stops us from seeing the opportunities that are there, okay? Where does that charitable part of Juan Longoria, Reverend Juan Longoria, come from? Where does that come from? Did you experience the same belief system that I did, or is that something that it was isolated to my family?
No, it's very similar. My parents raising us always taught us to do what's right. I mean, always, right? My dad was such a stand-up guy. I think enough time has passed for we'll get in trouble for this. I remember as a kid, we in high school doing silly things and stupid things. And I remember there was construction near my house on a major highway. And for some reason, we thought it would be funny to take one of those orange barrels just to use for future reference, just one of the 15 that were lined up. And I remember showing up at my parents' house in my buddy's truck because we had in the back. And I remember my dad giving me the worst kind of verbal conversation I'd ever had in my life and explaining the dangers that one gap, somebody could think they could drive through it and what could happen to their vehicle or worse. And so we took it back right away, right? But I've always grown up with two parents who on every little thing are do what's right. If we got 50 cents more in change, you go and you give it back because we don't want, that's just the way it is. So again, we weren't well off by any means. My mom had to make me shorts. I don't know if you remember, they're called jams back then. They're like the longer shorts.
Yeah.
Now they're capris now, but back then they were jams and they were bright colors. And so, but we never really knew the difference, right? Because a lot of the schools that I went to had other kids in similar situations, probably up until high school. But again, just the volunteering was fun to me. I just became passionate about being able to give back and say, we helped get an animal rescued, or that we raised $50 for a family that needed it, whatever it was. And again, it wasn't until kind of doing more of it that I saw there's more to do. And my idea for REVJLO was to allow people to do, again, like my grandfather, you do something and make it easier for people to do the same. So my idea was, let's create kind of the real Grande Valley's charity, right? Like the charity of the people, where if you want to come and help, please do. And then if you have an idea, we're going to help you with that. So it started off as, my wife wanted to do something to help animal shelters down here. So we said, cool. My cousin wanted to do something to help kids stay fit during the summer. So as we got more people to help out, we said, thank you for helping out. What do you want to do? What's your idea? Oh, I want to help the elderly during the winter. Awesome. We're all going to help you because you helped us. So it became a community of ideas and a community of giving. And, from the very beginning, we set forth a very clear agenda that we would not take any money. We didn't get money to pay for our monthly meetings. Nobody gets a check. Nobody gets paid hourly work. Like the only thing we bill is, our website, our email, 2-3% of what we net in throughout the year. But it just became, a family, and it became something that people knew they could trust our charity and that they could come to us with a variety of different issues, because our mission statement is so vague. And the IRS let it, was okay with it. We have a little more flexibility than other organizations who have a very specific mission statement. So we get to define what obstacles are, and we get to define what opportunity is. But as we've kind of evolved since 2012, and we're still small, I try not to go over the 50,000 donation mark, because I don't, right now with work and everything else, none of us have the time to do the additional paperwork that comes with kind of, going over 50 grand a year. But now that I've learned more about it, I feel like I can do it myself or hire somebody. But yeah, man, we've evolved, and we do a lot of work with the colonias, to your point, right? Like not everybody lives in the same situation. So for those who don't know what colonias are, these are neighborhoods that were stood up before there was a lot of regulation. And then as cities were built with regulation, they were built around them. So usually the people who live in here are the ones that are kind of the poorest of the poor. And down here in the Rio Grande Valley, Cameron County, Hidalgo County, Starr County, they're three of the poorest counties in the US, on a yearly basis. So there's a lot of work to be done. These people often don't qualify for city programs because they don't live in those cities. And even if they did, they don't have the means to drive the 5-10 miles to pick up whatever they may get during Christmas or, during time of a hurricane or something. So we do as much as we can. Christmas, we're out there like 6 a.m. With loud music, waking up people, giving kids presents with a couple Santas walking around. And then as we grew and we got more steady donors, I wanted to do something for the high school that I graduated from. And one of our main donors, one of my best friends, he's a physician down here. We do a lot of the scholarships for San Benito High School in San Benito, Texas. And we kind of over the years, we've done quite a bit.
I love that. And I love something that you said that you're doing with the nonprofit. And that is that you take the volunteers and then they ask them what they care about, what cause are they interested in doing, and then you support them with their cause and go in and become their cause part of the shareable. What a way to engage the community. Juan, let me ask you a question. How do you parent differently than your parents? What have you done differently when I'm a firm believer that as a father, okay, and as a son, I have a responsibility. I look at my parenting as a football field, right? I have a responsibility to where I take my son to the 50-yard dash line, right? I take him there, half of the field, and I let him there at the age of 18, 20, 21, whatever age you feel comfortable with. It's kind of like you're on your own. You have 100% of my support, whatever you need moving forward. but this is a defining moment where you take your ideas, you become who you are meant to be. How are you going to serve your community? How are you going to serve your country? How are you going to impact your business or your workplace, your friends, your family? How do you do all of that? So I also welcome him to challenge my ideas and not to stick with the ideas that I may have inherently pass on to him because I was socially conditioned by my parents. So I did a lot of self inventory, and I highlighted the great things that I learned from my parents. Like you, my father had an incredible work ethic. He was a very resourceful man. My mom had an uncanny faith, and I inherited that from each one of my parents. As human beings, not as parents, but as human beings, they had a lot of character defects and a lot of shortcomings. And I looked at those two separately, and I said, this is not what I want to be like. This is not how I want to be. This is not how I want to parent like. This is not how I want to show up as a member of my community. This is not how I want to show up as a grandfather, as an uncle, as a whatever, right? There's things that I want to do to improve myself. So what have you done differently than your parents?
I think for me, the one thing is, you touched on it, is kind of adding context to certain things. So my kids are 5 and 6, my little boy, Ezra, and my daughter, she's older, 6, Aria. We took them when they were little babies. We took them to church a few times, and my wife and I are Catholics, but light. We don't go every Sunday, and we don't do all the right things. We've eaten meat on Fridays, that kind of stuff. But we still consider ourselves as part of the Catholic Church as much as anybody else. So we took them to mass. There's a beautiful shrine down here. If you've been down, you're probably familiar with the Virgen de San Juan.
Sure, of course.
Beautiful shrine, and they have a mass, and they have mariachis during the mass instead of your normal choir. And my kids love mariachi music. And we went through it, and we kind of tried to teach as much as we could about why we were there and what it was. And it was very important for them to understand that this is where we'd be going to church and what we hope they get out of it. But at the end of the day, we also added, there is a lot of subjectivity, and there's a lot of different views on not just this religion, varied religions. Some people don't believe in God at all. And I said, as you get older, you will kind of make up your own mind, and that's okay. Because for me, it wasn't okay. I was Catholic, and that was it. And again, looking back in the grand scheme of life, I don't know that it had too big of an effect, but it does stick with you, right? Or I remember my dad, because he was working so much, and then my mom had to get a second job as well to kind of help out when costs started to rise around my high school years. They weren't able to go to my events. I mean, I was in mariachi band, I was in marching band, I was in mariachi, and I liked it. And I wasn't the best trumpet player, but I was okay. And I just wondered, I enjoyed it. And I wonder if I had more support, or maybe a plan to get a better trumpet or more lessons, could I have been in music instead of the industry I'm in now? And everything happens for a reason. But I want to make sure that as my kids are starting to find what they're passionate about, that we find ways to be there, support them, but also find ways to help them get better at whatever that is. So my daughter right now, she's great at sports. She's an amazing soccer player, and she doesn't want to play. She doesn't want to play anymore. She wants to dedicate her time to, she loves being in plays. She loves singing and learning the piano. So we're doing all we can to help her nurture that. And my little boy's loving sports. So as long as he wants to play, we're happy to be there and support him and practice with him offline. So I think those are the things that, again, but I think my job affords me that flexibility in the evenings that my mom and dad didn't have also. So I got to consider that. But
Sure.
That's really what I want to do, is be there in a different way to really cultivate their passions at an early age and allow them to explore what they want to, versus, having them go through and not being able to do that for their later years.
Oh, and I love that one, because, you said something a minute ago. Your parents, my parents, didn't have the flexibility to be able to be there, to be available. It was a different economy. It was a different world. It was a different time. Like you, I was a migrant worker with my fathers at the age of, 10, 11 years old. Mom and dad and their 13 children loved to Illinois for apple picking, or to Florida for orange picking. So I know all about that, and I'm a firm believer of education. I know that today there's a lot of questionable. There's a lot of questions whether whether you get your money's worth through a college education and a formal degree. I respect everybody else's belief, I wanted to make sure that my son went to college, got a degree. Whatever he wants to do afterwards is his choice, because I think there's other opportunities that derive from there. You know, there's social skills that get developed. There's relationships that you build. There's networking. You develop as a young adult, and in many cases you even meet your life partner at college. So there was opportunities that I wanted to make sure that my son was afforded. And like you, I don't necessarily believe your parents took you to the migrant fields, helping you develop a work ethic, because that's what our parents knew how to teach us. I don't necessarily believe I want my son to explore his creativity, to explore his innovation, to be able to learn how to pivot, to be able to know how to change. And I love that you're doing that with your kids as well. Now, let me ask you a question. How has your position as a co-chair and as a leader of a global company changed you?
A lot. I think first off, it reinforces the fact that, you just got to take that next step. You're never going to be ready for that next role, no matter, there's no such thing. Being in the role for a short amount of time, I learned how many situations that I had no clue I was going to be put in, where you have to make a decision, and it impacts hundreds or thousands of people, sometimes millions, depending on how big or small the decision is, in a butterfly effect kind of way. But there's definitely more of a focus for me on ensuring that I have the right people around me that help me make the right decisions, people who don't agree with me, to give me different sides of what we need to do, because ultimately a lot of the decisions that we make impact so many people in different ways, and the wrong one could be detrimental to people. And there's nothing that I focus on more than my employees' well-being before anything else. Everything I do, and I commit this to every team I've ever had, is whatever decision I make is going to be with your best interest in mind. You may not always agree with it, right? There may be things that we're asked to do that support the business, and we have to find a way to figure that out. But it may seem like more work in the short term, but I'll help you figure out how to do it in a smarter way. So it's not more time that you have to invest. It's shifting your focus around to things that actually get us the results that we want. Ultimately, it's just that it's you have a bigger picture. And I know we talk about that in every conversation. Everyone talks about, you got to have a bigger vision or bigger picture. You got to elevate the way that you think. And there's no real way to describe it until you're sitting in those rooms, having to make those decisions or consider different things and different aspects. In my role, I have to balance out the needs of the business, the needs of my employees, the needs of the customers, and somewhere in between all three of those things is the right thing to do or recommend. And then either I get to make that decision as part of my role, or, I go to my VP and, give him my perspective of what I think should happen, and they make the decision from there. But that's probably the biggest thing that's changed, is just, understanding what it means when people say you got to have that bigger picture thinking, and also understanding how hard it is to explain it to others, but really trying to find a way to do it so I can help those managers and senior managers that are up and coming figure that out sooner, again, to make them stronger candidates for these roles, because I want more Latinos and Latinas in these seats.
Love it. You're in South Texas, and South Texas is the melting pot of the Latino community, right? I would say there's probably the population there, what is it, 70% Latinos?
No, more than that, probably.
Yeah,
85, 90, yeah.
85%, 90% Latinos. Is a very, very strong. What are the challenges as Latinos in South Texas, the Latinos are facing in South Texas, that impairs our ability to grow, to evolve, to change? What do you think those are?
Emulation. I mean, we become what we see. And, down here is a very, very mixed pot, to your point. An example of what you talked about that I just said too is I was in Guatemala once, not once, several times, but one of the times I went out they have a big city dump, and there's people that live in the surrounding area of the dump. And when a big truck comes in and they dump the trash out, they kind of come down and they go through the bags and get whatever they can. And then they make art out of it, items, paintings, whatever. And they sell it to tourists to kind of feed their families. There's something beautiful about that and something very sad about that too, when you're getting to see it live and you're interacting with these people. But the thing that broke me the most was talking to one of I think he was 14, your boy. And I said, hey, there's a school nearby that they said they're willing to give you free schooling and free meals. And, it's a nonprofit that's out there. I was like, have you gone, or do you want to go? Do you want me to introduce you? And he said, no, I'm okay. This is what my grandparents did. This is what my parents did. And this is what I'm meant to do. And this is all I'm meant to do. And it wasn't about is that good to do or not, or, a difference in jobs. It's just the fact that he felt there's nothing else for him to do in the world but this one thing. And I really thought about that because down here in South Texas, we have a lot of great examples of leaders, right? We have so many kids, these kids we give scholarships to, they've gone off, they've come back, and now they're the ones funding the scholarship for future kids, right? Actually, I want to create a program where they take over the director roles in my nonprofit to give them that experience to take for resumes and future interviews. But in every city, right, there's the good and then there's the not so good. And we have a lot of people down here who don't show their kids how to manage their money, right? They're living in not great conditions, but they're driving a beautiful fancy car. And they would rather spend their money on a car that depreciates, and understanding how that works in life and how, just because you can afford a monthly payment on a car doesn't mean that it's a right investment, right? You could be taken, those dealerships will make the payment work over 15 years if they have to, but you're paying 3 times as much the value of the car. So those kind of lessons, I think, aren't still, widely communicated out to help our young and our youth focus their energy on the things that are going to make them more successful in whatever it is that they want to do. And I think they're a lot of ways we're grounded by what we know because we see it everywhere. And it's very rare to find something that's different. So it's what it's always been. There's that no pasa nada mentality. I mean, it's doesn't matter what's happening. It's not going to hurt us. COVID, no big deal. Don't worry about it. It's not going to impact us. Drink a Sprite and you'll be good. And I know we hear lots of jokes about that, but that's really the attitude is no pasa nada. We're good. And then not until it's too late do we realize that we have some catching up to do. And that seems to be the trend, especially in the Rio Grande Valley. Not that I want to speak bad about the place I live because it's home and I love it, but being separated by, an hour and a half gap of the King Ranch to the rest of the country where there's absolutely nothing. We've always gotten music later. We've gotten movies later. Trends are always later down here. I think that's part of what keeps us in a bubble, that we need a little more diversity to see what else is out there and how we can be different and better for our communities. But at the same time, there's so much good happening down here, and I'm excited about it and want to continue to be a part of it.
With that awareness of what's going on, what would you do different, or how could you use your position as a leader, as a member of co-chair of Magenta? How can you make a difference? How can I impact? How can other people impact? What can we do to serve our community and to see our community rise and move forward?
I think we're doing it. I mean, you got to get out there in front of people and just open their eyes to what it is. I ask hard questions, have difficult conversations. I like to tell people uncomfortable conversations is what we should strive for. We should make people feel uncomfortable because those are the topics that don't help us. I remember when I was in school, it was, you wouldn't talk to your parents about sex. You know what I mean?
About money.
Like down here. Yeah. About money, about sex. You don't talk about those things. And now, right, we more work to do, but kids are learning more and more about what sex is and what could happen, right? What STDs are, what could happen if you do get pregnant, and what that means to your short-term goals, your long-term goals. There's ways around it, obviously, but the education that happens changes perspective. And we need to think more about these little things, right? How do we break people out of impostor syndrome? A lot of people don't even know what that is, and that they're going through it, right? And even when you know what it is, how do you get out of it? Like, how do you proactively break that cycle of imposter syndrome by for me, for example, asking questions about when somebody gives you a compliment, ask them what specifically they liked about what you did. So at work, for me is, always got a pat on the back saying you did a great job. I would walk away thinking, are they just telling me that because I'm Latino, or are they telling me that and then going to talk to somebody else in their same position, laughing about me because I didn't do a good job? So I learned to ask, like, what exactly did you like so I can do it again? Or, would you like me to share that with other people? And as people's like, yes, please, or put this together, share it. That for me created the confidence that, okay, they're not just saying it. And, it was never anything they did. It was in my own head. But those are things that I need to do. I think those are the things that we need to get really good about having conversations around and educating people, giving our own stories, our own examples. I mean, there's more for me to do, right? I want to be the next vice president of T-Mobile, and I'm not done yet. And then who knows from there, right? I know you've done a lot of great things in your life too, and you're not done yet. But it's, how do we take time out to say, hey, I was sitting in that same chair that you're sitting in, regardless of your situation. I was a migrant worker, just like you. I was a bartender. I was a waiter. I was trying to figure out, I only had enough money to pay my bills. But here's what I did to figure out what direction I wanted to go, how to find out what I'm really good at, and how I protected that brand to go get the things that I wanted, and how I'm going to continue to do that. There's a lot more that I can do.
I love that. I love that, Juan. There's a couple of things that I want to highlight that you mentioned. You mentioned the fact that when somebody told you, I really like what you did, and you went back and asked them, what exactly did you like what I did? And how would you like for me to share with someone else? Okay. What a great way to really make a connection and to be able to identify, okay, exactly what your strength was in that particular project or that particular situation, but at the same time to build self-confidence, right? To know that, wow, I'm being acknowledged for something that I'm doing. And now I'm given an opportunity to share with others, okay? And not only that, now you really know that your team, your upper management is noticing your abilities and your qualities. I absolutely love that. What a great tip to follow. But I want to ask you a question. You said, I'm not done yet. I want to be the next vice president of T-Mobile. Why vice president and not why the president of T-Mobile or the CEO? I want to dig into that one because you talked about imposter syndrome, and I want to know why particularly vice president.
Well, because for me, that's the next step up, right? I'm not going to skip over a VP role to get into that CEO role or a president role. And once I have the VP role, I don't necessarily know that I'm going to want that role, right? One of the very important things that I've learned is you have to be passionate about what you're doing. If you're not passionate about what you're doing, at some point you just say, this isn't for me, or you're not going to put in your best work, and wherever you're at, it's going to ask you to go somewhere else. Yeah. So for me, to say that I would never want to be a CEO, that's not something I'm going to say. But right now, it's not what I'm looking at. Right now, I'm looking at, in my short 9 months I've been director, right, is we've had amazing results in the department that we have in delivering great customer experiences to millions. And that's a piece of getting promoted. It's not just about, the results that your team can drive. It's also what businesses have you made? How have you brought back revenue to the business? All these other things that come to play, your understanding of those things. But I know that, I'm feeling good about where we're at. I have great mentors that are in that role that I kind of see what they're doing and what they're able to drive. And I feel like that's something that I can absolutely do, when I build these skill set a little bit more and put in the right positions to learn more about the role and show how I could make those decisions and drive results in a different way.
And of course, I had to challenge you, John.
No. That's a great question, but it's a great opportunity because what I'm trying to get at is some people will say, well, you know what, I want to be a lawyer because they make a lot of money, or I want to be a doctor, or I want to sell real estate, whatever it is. I want to play professional soccer. If you don't like what you're doing, it's not going to matter. And at some point, it's going to break you down. And I would say to your point, there's abundance. There's plenty of ways to make money. Find what you're passionate about and chase that down. And there's a way to capitalize on it monetarily. And there's nothing wrong with wanting to capitalize on it. But find out what you're passionate. Like for me, I'm loving the focus we've had over the last few years. I think Clubhouse was great for me because it opened my eyes to how many opportunities there are to share ideas and speak to promoting, and advancing the young Latinos representation, more DE&I. I've been approached by people, can you come speak to my company? Can you come do this, right? I've been featured on a few big national Latino ERGs where I shared what we're doing at T-Mobile, and people are like, oh, I'd love for you to share that with my company. And it's always a question of, well, how much do you charge? And for me right now, like I'm saying, I'll attend as long as it works my schedule. I'm not going to charge you anything. Not that there's anything wrong with charging money, but for me, it's I'm enjoying this, but I also feel like I'm creating a skill set. And once I feel I have that skill set down, I probably will say, hey, well, now that I feel like I've got this down and I can drive real change for you, here's kind of what I'm looking at. But again, there's so many people that are making a lot of money doing this, right? And there's nothing wrong with that. That's great, and I encourage it. But they found their passion, and they're providing for themselves and their family through their passion, and they're going to be a lot happier than had they chosen another job that sounds great that they didn't really like. So, when you set your goals, chase down what you really, really want to do, and know that you're committed to it before you kind of step into a situation that you're going to regret stepping into.
I love it, Juan. I want to commend you, first of all, for how articulate you are in your answers. I also want to commend you for your leadership and everything you're doing in South Texas. I don't want to let it go unnoticed the fact that you have met your goals for in your new position for T-Mobile in less than 6 months, what your projections were for 2 years. You met them in less than 6 months, and you're doing an incredible job. What does imposter syndrome really mean to you? What did that mean to you before you identify it?
It was doubt. It was always looking over your shoulder. It was walking on eggshells. It was thinking that no matter how good I did, that it was always a sense of being in the right situation that just kind of was handed to me. One of my really close friends years ago, right as I was getting promoted, he said something to me, and maybe that's the start of it. He said, you're one of the luckiest people I know.
Wow.
And, he said, it's like you're the Homer Simpson of call centers. You just keep landing into these safe spots. And, we laughed about it, but it always, even now, right? 10, 12 years later, it's still in my head. And I thought about that. I'm like, is it that? Like, do I just end up and I make these moves and I just land in a spot? And I felt like it wasn't, but I always had that doubt. And up until really the last maybe 3 years is where I started asking different questions. Tell me what I'm doing well. I went back on my own and said, here's a change that I made to this process or this initiative or how we, this performance management program. Here are the results that happened shortly after. And they tied back directly to the specific areas of focus that we targeted. So those are the kind of things that now I feel really good about my leadership style and the way in which we manage performance. It's not a great day every day, but when most of your days are at or better than you were before, there's strength and confidence there. And when you can create a plan and make it specific enough to where you can go inspect it and audit it, it changes everything. So that, along with knowing how to interact with people, my leaders, and how to find my voice and feel that I have the right to know what I'm being commended for, what I'm being applauded for, or be very specific when I'm getting feedback about what I can do better. All those things tie in together to kind of minimize that. I don't think it's ever really gone, but certainly hasn't been top of mind for a long time.
Absolutely. And you know what? Like you, I experienced that for a long time. I achieved success very early on in life. And I often felt that fear, that insecurity, like what's going to happen next? What's going to happen that is going to, I can't be this lucky. Okay. I can't be this lucky. Something bad's going to happen that is going to trump me into my house. They're going to realize how smart I'm not, and there was always this little doubts on myself. And me, I developed self-sabotage and habits to quiet that noise, to hide those fears, to hide those insecurities. But what I realized, and this is a message that I want to drive home to our audience, is that a lot of times the imposter syndrome is not that you're an imposter where you're going, is that you have outgrown the area of your life where you're at right now, currently. That time and space where you're at right now, you're no longer feeling comfortable there. You have outgrown it, but you do not know how to detach yourself physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. And when you're able to do that, when you're able to shift that mindset, you exit that state of survival, you begin to see your life with clarity and possibilities, and you begin to see your own potential. And that's what happened to me. I think that's what's happened to Juan Longoria. What an incredible interview. I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for this opportunity. And I cannot wait for you to become the next VP of T-Mobile. Juan Longoria, thank you. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Peter.